Since my little brother Benjamin was found, I've been gradually marginalized by the family. To compensate him, my father directly had him take my position, taking over the project I poured my heart and soul into. When the project went south, my sister Megan gave false testimony, shifting the blame for his screw-up onto me. He was all alone, and my wife Wendy actually showed him extra care, insisting that as the elder sister-in-law, it was her duty to look after this long-neglected little brother. So, in anger, I confronted him, only to be punched down the stairs and break my leg. Just when I thought my mother would say something fair, she advised me not to be petty. Even my daughter wished her father was Benjamin. While I was on my sick bed, filled with rage, I unexpectedly had an awakening. It turned out I was just a villainous supporting character in an inspirational novel, and all my hard work in building my career was meant to be a stepping stone for the hero, Benjamin, to snatch my success. Realizing my fate, I directly handed over my wife and daughter to Benjamin, and even voluntarily gave up the company's inheritance rights to go abroad. However, when they all thought I was just a pariah, a broken dog, I made a high-profile return, directly reaping the benefits that Benjamin was supposed to. When I first woke up, my so-called family members were still blaming me. My parents, who always valued me, were now siding with the other son. My mother said, "Benjamin didn't mean to. Besides, you were arguing with him so aggressively at the time, it's not strange that he panicked. Both of you were at fault and you just had a scratch. So I've decided to turn the page. Don't be so bothered by it anymore." She looked at me with a kind expression, expecting me to, as I always had before, be blindly obedient despite my dissatisfaction. I did as she wanted, saying faintly, "Okay." My mother hesitated and then comforted me. "Mom knows it hasn't been easy for you. When you're discharged, I'll have Auntie Wang make you some good food." I nodded calmly as before. My sister Megan frowned at me and said, "I will help you with the project. You don't need to take the blame for Benjamin anymore. Is that all right? Don't blame me. Benjamin is still new to this. He can't handle such a huge amount of pressure. Besides, you didn't explain things clearly during the handover. You were at fault too." I remember clearly that the documents I handed over to Benjamin had every detail spelled out, even the exact page number of specific files in specific folders. It's just that Benjamin skimmed through them carelessly, which is why the critical data went wrong. Of course, I wouldn't argue with Megan again. I just hummed in agreement and didn't speak further. There was nothing to argue about. She knew the problem lay with Benjamin, but to cover up his mistakes and the project he messed up, she tried to throw the huge responsibility onto me. After awakening, her so-called selfless elder sister persona seemed ridiculously funny to me. My continuous cold answers probably made them uncomfortable. My father continued, "You should rest well, and when you're discharged, come back to the company and help Benjamin. He's new to the company and needs some results to win over everyone. As his big brother, you should be more generous and give your little brother a hand. Once he's established himself in the company, you can return to your original position." I looked at my father, curious as to whether he remembered that he once proudly claimed to treat all his children equally. When I first joined the company, he insisted I start from the bottom, and I didn't have any complaints. I worked my way up from the bottom for 8 years before reaching where I am today. But when Benjamin mentioned joining the company, my father had him, who had only completed an associate's degree, directly replace my position and take over the project I was about to complete. I smiled at my father and said, "There's no need to restore my position. When I'm discharged, I'll complete all the handover procedures." My father frowned and said, "Sincere, what's gotten into you? Are you trying to cause trouble?" I shook my head calmly and said, "It's nothing. I'm just tired and plan to resign." At this point, Benjamin, who had been pretending to be a quail, stepped forward and said, "Big brother, I know my qualifications for this position aren't good enough to convince everyone, and it's overkill for you to assist me. You don't need to resign. I should be the one resigning. Also, about pushing you down the stairs, although it was an accident, It was indeed my fault. I've been feeling guilty about it. I came here today to apologize to you. I didn't expect to make you even more upset. I'm sorry." His face was full of guilt, but his eyes were full of scheming. Unfortunately, other than me, everyone else only saw the expression on his face. My father immediately rebuked me. "I have been teaching you to be broad-minded since you were young. Is that how you treat your little brother?" My mother shook her head sadly and said, "Benjamin was stolen when he was just born. He has suffered outside for so many years. It's normal that we focus on him more now that we've found him again. Why do you have to turn against your family over this?" Megan looked at me coldly and said, "Mom and Dad don't talk to him anymore. Sincere is just a spoiled young master. Everyone has to revolve around him. Look at how much effort you've put in. Does he even show a hint of being moved? In my opinion, he's just selfish." I tugged at the corner of my mouth, and I couldn't help recalling the time when I got along well with my family before Benjamin came back. However, those warm scenes could no longer cause any emotion in me. It seems this is also a side effect of the awakening, keeping me from being swayed by useless sentiments. I calmly said to them, Yes, you are right. That's right, but I'm tired now, can't I be?" Megan scoffed, about to say something, but Dad interjected, "All right, Sincere needs rest to recover. Let's go back first. Sincere, you need to calm down too. We'll discuss everything as a family when you're discharged." Mom looked at me hesitantly before saying, "Mom will come see you again in a couple of days." Benjamin then said to the woman next to me, "Sister-in-law, please take good care of Big Brother. And Lily, remember to be good and don't make Dad angry, okay?" Megan added, "Sister-in-law, you've suffered." Hearing the two siblings, I looked up and saw Megan patting Victoria's arm while Benjamin was squatting down, gently telling Lily something. Looking at the mother and daughter's disapproving and disdainful looks towards me, I suddenly realized that because they had been silent, I'd forgotten that my so-called wife and daughter were in the room. After Dad and the others left, only Victoria and Lily remained in the room. Victoria looked at me for a moment, then sighed. "You used to be so mature and steady. How did you become so unreasonable? Benjamin is your little brother, and he's suffered so much outside. You should take care of him more, not always be at odds with him." I agreed. "You're right. I'll leave it to you to take care of him. I'm tired now. I need to rest." She stomped her foot in anger. "Who do you think I am? How many times do I have to tell you? I'm taking care of him because he's your brother. Can't your mind be cleaner?" I'm really tired, so I didn't bother to remind her that in just 6 months she'd changed from calling Benjamin your brother to simply Benjamin. The next second, a childish voice came. "Dad, you're so petty with your own little brother. You're so cringe." 7-year-old Lily pursed her lips. Her eyes filled with disapproval and disdain. I used to find her precociousness cute, but since Benjamin appeared, her precociousness had turned into attacks against me. She felt that I was too strict and didn't care about her, only about work, while her uncle often came to buy her little gifts. So, she hated that I was always finding fault with her Uncle Benjamin. She was just like her mother. I laughed. "Bear with it, you'll be free soon." I closed my eyes. "Okay, I really need to rest." Just before I closed my eyes, I saw a hint of surprise and unease flash in Lily's eyes. I heard Victoria reprimand her. "What are you talking about to a child?" I didn't open my eyes to look at Victoria, but her voice also contained a hint of anxiety. What were this mother and daughter up to? After a while, I heard Victoria's voice. "You rest and calm down. I'll take Lily home first." They had barely left the room when I heard Lily say outside the door, "Mom, if only Uncle Benjamin had been found sooner, he could have married you, and he would be my dad instead." Victoria said calmly, "Don't talk nonsense." Then the mother and daughter gradually walked away. Listening to their conversation, I no longer felt the previous heart-wrenching pain. Instead, I quickly drifted off to sleep. I dreamt of some past events. My parents, my sister, and I used to have a harmonious and happy family. The family business, the Carter Group, had once been on the verge of bankruptcy. We only had enough money for one person to study abroad. My sister refused to continue her studies and insisted that I go. In those hardest times, my parents never reduced my allowance or mentioned the family's difficulties. Instead, they worried that I wasn't eating or sleeping well. Then I dreamed of Victoria. She and I were college classmates. We grew close from spending time together in the same club. She said she knew there was a big difference between our family backgrounds. She wanted to become more outstanding to be worthy of me. I repeatedly told her that my family had no prejudices about social status, but she refused my financial assistance. She insisted on splitting the living expenses with me and earned a scholarship through her own efforts. At the time, her feelings for me were very sincere. Once, one of her friends told her that a woman's youth was priceless, and that spending a man's money was her right and not to be fooled by me. She broke ties with her friend over that. My family knew we were truly in love and supported us being together. Later, we got married and had Lily. I once fell down the stairs to save Lily and was in a coma for 3 days. The doctor said I was almost a goner. When I woke up, I saw Victoria at my bedside, crying her heart out, saying she wouldn't live if I didn't wake up. The scenes in my dream kept changing. I dreamed that when Lily was 3 years old, she had a serious illness. At that time, Victoria was away and couldn't return. I was in charge of a major project for Carter Group, so I worked during the day and took care of Lily at night, only sleeping 10 hours in 7 days. After she recovered, I fell seriously ill. At that time, Lily, who was still a little bundle, said with red eyes that she wanted to grow up quickly so she could take care of her dad and stop him from working so hard. Sometimes I feel that my relationships with family and love are perfect. Although there are ups and downs in life, overall it has been smooth. I should be happy in this life and continue to be happy until Ethan came into my life. After waking up, I blinked and thought about the things in my dream. It was as if I were watching someone else's life. Just like last time, I stayed in the hospital for 2 more days. After confirming everything was fine, I was discharged. On the day of my discharge, neither my parents, who had said they would pick me up, nor my wife showed up. Instead, while I was getting a taxi, I saw a post on Ethan's social media. He had posted, "Thank you to mom, dad, sister, sister-in-law, and my little niece for coming so early to celebrate my birthday." I smiled and swiped away the post. They had indeed given me unforgettable family warmth, which was why I had agreed to give way to Ethan time and time again when they asked me to. But now I felt it was enough. I had a great life ahead of me and couldn't keep sinking in this inescapable mud. When I got home, I started packing my luggage. While packing, I suddenly felt a wave of irritation. It wasn't because of those people, but because I had lived in this house for years, and packing all my belongings was going to take a lot of effort. I continued packing until around 7 p.m. when the mother and daughter returned. Victoria opened the door and, seeing me, said with a hint of guilt, "Honey, I'm so sorry. Today was Ethan's birthday and I forgot about your discharge. I only found out you were already home when I took Lily to the hospital." But her tone quickly turned accusatory as she added, "You should have told us you were discharging yourself. Lily and I made a wasted trip. Don't tell me you're getting angry over some trivial nonsense again." I shook my head and said, "No, I was just busy and forgot to text you." She frowned and said, "You forgot? And what's so busy about after being discharged?" I said, "Packing my clothes." She said, "What's there to pack?" "Oh, right, Lily and I were rushing to pick you up and didn't get to eat." Lily walked over and awkwardly said, "I want shrimp noodles." This was her unique way of showing she wanted to make amends. In the past, after disagreements, she would soon come and tell me what she wanted to eat, and I would smile and go to the kitchen to make it for her. Here I was, a vice president of a large corporation, managing so many employees, yet I ended up cooking and learning to cook for this mother and daughter, only to lose everything and die miserably. What was I even trying to achieve? However, having been packing for so long, I was actually hungry. So I went to the kitchen, noticing them both exhale in relief. 10 minutes later, I came out with a bowl of noodles and placed it on the table. Victoria was stunned and asked, "Only one bowl?" Lily also stopped in her tracks and asked, "You put chili in it and chicken drumsticks," Victoria scolded. "How could you forget that your daughter doesn't eat spicy food or chicken?" I took a sip of the soup and said with a smile, "She doesn't eat it, but I do. I'm hungry too. There's nothing wrong with filling my own stomach, right?" The faces of the mother and daughter darkened instantly. Lily stiffly said, "I don't want to eat." Victoria glanced at me and coldly said, "I'll take Lily out to eat." I ignored them as they slammed the door on their way out and finished the entire bowl of noodles happily. Then I went back to packing my luggage. Once I had nearly finished, I called a lawyer to discuss the divorce. I couldn't use the company's legal department, or they would find out about my divorce before I was ready. It was safer to hire my own lawyer. Victoria and Lily didn't come back that night, but I didn't care. With Victoria, her mother, around, they should be fine. The next day, I went to the lawyer's office as scheduled. During the discussion, I received many calls. I checked and saw that they were from my paper family, so I immediately silenced them. After the meeting, it was already dusk. I randomly picked a number to call back. As soon as the call connected, my mother's anxious voice came through. She said, "Sincere, we were wrong to forget to pick you up from the hospital yesterday because it was Ethan's birthday. But you can't just ignore your wife and child. I wouldn't have known that you weren't even feeding them if they hadn't come to Ethan." I was speechless. I said, "The nanny had the day off and there was no one home. Besides, they have money, they can go out to eat." She sighed and said, "Listen to your mother. Don't be angry with your daughter-in-law. Ethan has been feeling guilty too. You're making him feel uneasy. Your father and sister don't want to see him unhappy." I replied, "Including you, right?" She said, "Sincere, don't be like that. You and Ethan are both my sons. To me, you're both dear." I asked calmly, "So what do you want me to do?" She said, "You should take the initiative to apologize to them and then explain to Ethan to ease his mind. Why should a family bicker over who's right and wrong?" I laughed and said, "Fine, I'm just a bit busy lately. I'll go see them in a few days." She said, "You child." I hung up before she could finish. I figured I should speed up the divorce process and just set them free. When I got home, Victoria and Lily were already there. They were both stony-faced. Victoria was the first to attack. "Lily and I didn't come home last night and you weren't worried at all? Did you go out fooling around?" I didn't want to explain that I hadn't been fooling around and simply said, "Isn't her mother around? I figured you'd take good care of her. Besides, you've always said that Lily finds me too strict and is scared of me, asking me to give my daughter some private space, right?" The mother and daughter both froze. They must have remembered a time before when they hadn't come home until late, and Victoria's phone had been turned off. I was so furious with no one answering my calls that I almost called the police. Then I saw Benjamin's social media post. I felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over my head. Victoria and Lily had gone to the newly opened amusement park with Benjamin and had a blast. They even had dinner together in the evening. Some passers-by thought they were a family of 3 and even wanted to take a photo for them. Benjamin posted one of those photos on his social media, captioning it, "They thought we were a family of 3, LOL. He was using that to shut me up, so I wouldn't have a reason to give him a hard time, since he said he just found it amusing. It was after 10 p.m. when I finally heard them opening the door. When I questioned them sternly, Victoria retorted disdainfully, "Lily needs her own space. You don't need to be so controlling. Besides, you don't need to be in such a rush. I'm her mother. I'll take good care of her." Lily didn't say anything, but her expression was as cold and impatient as her mother's. I pulled myself together and smiled at them. "Have fun. I'm going to shower. Oh, I ate out already. If you haven't had dinner, order some takeout. The housekeeper won't be back until tomorrow." Lily suddenly spoke, sounding a little nervous. "There's a movie coming out in the middle of next month that's suitable for a family to watch together. Mid-next month, if all goes well, Victoria and I will have finished our cooling off period and gotten our divorce papers. I smiled at Lily and said, I'm busy. Why don't you ask your Uncle Benjamin? He'd probably be delighted. Lily stood there, a hurt look in her eyes. She said stubbornly, You're right. It's better to ask Uncle Benjamin. Then she ran back to her room and slammed the door. Both mother and daughter loved to slam doors. Seeing all of this, Victoria said angrily, Sincere, are you done yet? Lily is trying to make up with you. Why do you have to be so sarcastic? She's still a child. When did you become so petty? Suddenly her anger subsided and she said in a pleading tone, Sincere, I know you're angry with me. I can change. Lily will change too. Please don't be like this. If she had said this any day before I was hospitalized, I would have told myself to let it go. After all, they were my wife and child. I should trust them. But it was too late now. Countless times over the past 3 years after our arguments, I wanted to have an open and honest conversation with her. I just wanted to talk to her, but Victoria would always inexplicably change the topic, saying I didn't have an attitude of admitting my mistakes and then end up pointing out all my faults. Lily was even more direct, saying she didn't want to listen. If I wanted her to be close to me, I needed to learn how to interact with her like her Uncle Benjamin, instead of being so strict with her. Now I've learned, but they're not satisfied. On Monday, I sent Megan my resignation letter and started working on my handover documents. Within 5 minutes, Megan called me into her office and said coldly, What are you trying to pull now? I replied, I'm resigning. What else could it be? She chuckled as if she had heard a joke. She said, How old are you? Are you still threatening people with resignation? Megan suddenly said with some helplessness, Sincere, sister was in the wrong before. I apologize to you. But why can't you get along with Benjamin? He's not even adopted. He's our brother by blood. I had wanted to as well, but Benjamin didn't want to. From the first day he walked through the door, I saw clear jealousy and malice in his eyes when he looked at me. Benjamin was determined to take away everything I cared about. And I was tired. I didn't want to compete with him anymore. Of course, Megan wouldn't believe me, so I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. She seemed to realize I was serious, and her face grew more and more displeased. Finally, she said coldly, You can tell Dad about your resignation yourself. I nodded and said, I will, but the paperwork still needs to be processed here. Also, you need to find someone quickly to take over my work, be it Benjamin or someone else. I'm definitely leaving in a month. Megan bit her lip and said, Then you can leave. I turned and left. At the door, she stopped me and said, Are you resigning to try to win Victoria and Lily back? If so, I can talk to her. I interrupted her, saying, I'm doing this for myself. I'm leaving now. After work, I received a call from my father asking me to come home for dinner on Saturday and saying that Victoria and Lily would also be there. After hanging up, I received a call from my lawyer who said that the divorce papers had been drafted and sent to my email. He asked me to look them over when I had time. I perked up and quickly went home to check my email. After going over the documents carefully, I was very satisfied with my lawyer's efficiency and ability. The door opened, and Victoria and Lily came home. It was an hour later than usual. I looked at my social media and didn't see anything from Benjamin. I didn't know if he had blocked me or simply hadn't posted anything. However, considering it took half an hour to get from school to home, that half hour probably wasn't enough time for them to have dinner with Benjamin. Victoria looked tired. She looked at me and said, I picked Lily up today. Her teacher told me that she's been distracted in class lately. She's been extra prone to tantrums, and she often gets into arguments with her classmates. Sincere, whatever grievances you have, you need to set them aside for now. No, Victoria, Lily is still your daughter. You're her father. You can't just ignore her. I looked at Lily. Every time I disciplined her, she would run and hide behind her mother, crying pitifully. And Victoria would then scold me, saying that my way of teaching was too barbaric. Children need to be reasoned with, not hit. I could indeed discipline her, but did she need me to? I walked over to her and squatted down, asking, Lily, is something bothering you? If you're willing to talk about it, tell me. If it's within my power, I'll help you." Victoria was right about one thing. Lily was, after all, my daughter. Whether she was an adult or not, at least now I couldn't let the 7-year-old go astray. Lily pursed her lips but said without hesitation, "I hope Daddy will always be my daddy." I touched her hair and promised, "As long as you still acknowledge me, I will always be your daddy." I then looked at Victoria, who said coldly, "Of course she'll acknowledge you. What nonsense are you talking about?" This was different from the plot I knew after awakening. According to the plot I knew, at the family dinner on Saturday, I would fly into a rage because of the closeness between the mother and daughter and Benjamin. Victoria would be completely disappointed in me and ask for a divorce, and Lily would point at me, saying she didn't want me, this evil man, as her father. I had no expectations for Victoria, but it was undeniable that Lily still tugged at my heartstrings. So, this was my last chance for her. On Saturday, Victoria and her daughter arrived at the old mansion on time. As soon as the door opened, Benjamin was the first to greet us. He looked at me with delight and said, "Big brother, I'm so glad you could come." The expression on his face was so sincere, no wonder he could become the hero. I said calmly, "Dad asked me to, of course I should come." Father was a bit embarrassed and coughed twice, saying, "All right, it's just a family dinner, no need to be so tense." At the table, Mother was also very careful, first putting food into Benjamin's bowl, and then quickly putting the same dish into mine. My father said, "By the way, Sincere, don't mention resigning anymore." He put down his chopsticks and said, "Dad will give you a long vacation. When you come back, you can continue to be the deputy general manager. As for Benjamin, Dad will open another company for you to gain experience. And when you have experience, you can join the head office." Benjamin smiled gently and said, "I have no objections. I'll listen to Dad. And indeed, I lack experience and need to learn more." But his hand gripping the chopsticks was so tight that he almost broke them. Megan looked at me amused and said, "Now the young master is satisfied." I smiled politely. Benjamin wouldn't be so passive. He must have something up his sleeve. After the meal, Mother pulled me to a side hall to chat, showering me with concern, making me feel like I was back before Benjamin had returned, except, ultimately, something was different. After chatting with Mother, I went to the main hall and heard voices coming from the garden. I walked over. In the garden, Lily was looking down, not daring to look at Benjamin. She said, "I'm sorry, Uncle. I've decided to go see that movie with Daddy." Then she said urgently, "But I'll see other movies with you later." Benjamin's face was a little pale, but he still coaxed her gently, "Silly child, what are you apologizing for? It's normal to watch a family movie with Daddy." Victoria's eyes were full of gentleness. She whispered, "If Sincere had half of Benjamin's consideration for others, that would be great." Benjamin said understandingly, "Sister-in-law, don't say that. Brother is like this because he cares about you. Sometimes I also think that if I hadn't come back to this family, would it be better for everyone?" Victoria interrupted him hastily, "Don't say that, none of us think that way. Lily also likes you very much." Lily nodded repeatedly, saying, "Uncle, actually, I've always wanted you to be my dad, but Mommy said that Daddy has done a lot for me. I can't make him sad." At this time, Benjamin saw me. From an angle where Victoria and her daughter couldn't see, he made a loser gesture to me with a triumphant smile. Then he pretended to be surprised and called out, "Brother!" Victoria and Lily were both startled and looked at me, their eyes full of panic. Benjamin rushed forward and grabbed my hand, explaining, "Brother, listen to me, please." His voice even had a hint of crying. I slowly pried his hand away. Victoria pursed her lips and said, "All right, Benjamin didn't mean to. We didn't say anything too much. Sincere, don't be like that." I was speechless. I hadn't said or done anything yet. Lily, although nervous, stepped forward and stood in front of Benjamin, afraid that I would hurt him. Benjamin said, "Sister-in-law, Lily, could you leave us for a moment? I want to talk to my brother alone for a few minutes." Although worried, they listened to Benjamin and left, looking back at him and me repeatedly before they did. I understood. It wasn't that they were worried about me, they were just worried about Benjamin. When there was only the two of us left, Benjamin's expression changed, and he said mockingly, "It must hurt seeing the people you care about only care about me, right?" I was just confused. I asked, "Why do you have such a big malice towards me? I was only 2 years old when you were taken away." Benjamin gradually became manic and said, "Because I'm not willing. Why are we both from the Miller family? My son, for over 20 years you've lived like a young master while I've been worse off than a beggar. I know you look down on me for only having a college diploma, but since I was little, that awful couple tormented me. I had to do all the housework, leaving no time for studies. I only got to go to college because that family died in an accident when I was in high school, finally setting me free. So I hate you. I will take away everything and everyone you care about." He calmed down, the malice in his eyes undisguised. "Right now, Mom, Dad, sister, and even your wife and daughter still have feelings for you," he said. "But I'm telling you, soon they'll completely despise you. Just you wait." I calmly asked, "I thought you were just missing Mom and Dad too much, maybe even in love with my wife, that you were jealous of me." He laughed as if I had said something absurd. "They're worthy? They're just tools for my revenge on you. I want you to watch your father, mother, sister, wife, and daughter turn against you and abandon you." With that, he left triumphantly. I watched his back, feeling neither anger nor unease, just curiosity about what he would do. 3 days later, I found out. That morning, I had just woken up when Victoria angrily pushed open my bedroom door. Yes, ever since I was discharged from the hospital, she and I had been sleeping in separate rooms. I had never seen Victoria like that. Her eyes bloodshot and face full of resentment. She screamed, "Benjamin tried to kill himself. Are you happy now?" Speechless, I rushed to Benjamin's hospital room and saw our parents and Megan gathered around Benjamin's bed, their eyes red. Lily immediately ran to him, crying, "Uncle, what happened? Don't scare me." My mother saw me. She had been relatively gentle to me before, but at that moment she strode over and berated me. "What did you say to Benjamin that day?" Her eyes were full of hatred. "He swallowed a whole bottle of sleeping pills." My father coldly looked at me and said, "Your resignation is approved. From today on, you have nothing to do with the Sincere family. I won't hold you accountable for the money you've spent growing up, but don't expect a single penny from me in the future. The family's assets will only go to your sister and Benjamin." Megan glared at me and warned, "Don't even think about using the Sincere family name to make money outside. If I find out, I'll never let you off." I nodded. "Okay. The money I've made for the company over the years far exceeds what the Sincere family spent on me. I don't owe them anything. And from my earnings at Sincere, I also made some private investments, achieving financial independence long ago." My mother suddenly started crying again. "Sincere, why have you become like this? Do you know that Benjamin wrote a suicide note saying he shouldn't have come back, and when he was unconscious he kept saying sorry to you, that he never wanted to take anything from you, and for you not to hate him so much? You're brothers. How could you be so unforgiving?" I looked at my mother, thinking that Benjamin would be very smug at this moment if he were awake. I rolled my eyes and turned to leave, but in the next second Victoria called me. She said in a hoarse voice, "Wait, I can't live with a man like you anymore. I'll be contacting a lawyer these next few days to draw up the divorce papers." Lily wiped her face and agreed. "Yeah, a bad person like him doesn't deserve to be my dad." She yelled at me angrily, "I don't want someone as evil as you to be my father." This sentence finally brought down the sword of Damocles. Turning her head, she threw herself onto Benjamin, crying, "Uncle, I was wrong. I'll only listen to you from now on. I only want to watch that movie with you. Please wake up, okay?" I said to Victoria, "Fine, no need for these few days. I have the divorce papers here ready. When you have time, you can take a look, and if there are no problems, just sign them. What did you say?" Victoria's face suddenly turned pale as she looked at me in disbelief. "You have the divorce papers ready? When did you draft them?" I smiled. 2 days after I was discharged from the hospital." Victoria's chest rose and fell rapidly. She stammered, "Sincere, how could you? Megan couldn't stand my indifference anymore and grabbed my left hand. You go and apologize to Benjamin. You're not allowed to stop until he wakes up, or I'll never acknowledge you as my brother again. I raised my right hand and pushed her away hard. Before she could speak, I frowned and interrupted. Miss Sincere, my left hand was severely injured. Please don't be so rough. Megan's face changed suddenly at those words. My father and mother were also startled and their faces paled. I knew that they had remembered. When we were being targeted by a rival company, my left hand was shattered trying to protect them, and I could never lift heavy objects or have full movement again. Megan moved her lips, her face pale, and took a step back. I looked at them and said, "If there's nothing else, I'll go now." As I left the room, I thought I heard someone shout, "Sincere." The next day, Victoria and I went to the courthouse to finalize the divorce. When she brought Lily home yesterday, she saw me waiting for her with the divorce papers in hand. She couldn't avoid it and had made harsh statements earlier, so she had no choice but to grit her teeth and sign. As soon as I left the courthouse, I immediately called the moving company, loaded my pre-packed belongings, and I left the house where I'd lived for years. A month-long cooling-off period passed and we met again at City Hall. I signed first. Her hand trembled slightly. Suddenly, she threw down the pen, erupting, "Sincere, how can you be so heartless? To prove you don't care, you'd even abandon your own daughter." The City Hall staff gave me strange looks. How ridiculous. She was claiming moral high ground and throwing dirt at me. We hadn't spoken in a month. However, Benjamin woke up 2 days after I left the hospital. He kept texting, boasting that Victoria was taking care of him daily. Lily also visited him often. To prevent Victoria from focusing on Benjamin and forgetting about the divorce, I reminded her the day before the cooling-off period ended. Much later, I received an angry voice message in response. She said, "Don't worry, I'll be there." Coming back to the present, I frowned and said in front of everyone, "Isn't it a good thing that I'm fulfilling your wish to be with my little brother?" Her face paled. She hadn't expected me, who had never spoken harshly to her, to lay it all out. Victoria, deflated, quickly signed and picked up the divorce certificate. As we left City Hall, I, in a good mood, smiled at her and said, "Goodbye, Victoria. Goodbye forever." 5 years later, Wendy, our son, and I returned home. Charles, riding on my back, said, "Daddy, are you tired? I can walk." Wendy smiled, "Our son is worried about you. Let me carry him for a bit." Charles wasn't heavy, but I gladly handed him to his mother. The next moment, a hesitant, trembling voice called, "Daddy?" I turned around. Victoria, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, stood there with Lily staring at me. Lily had grown noticeably taller. Victoria looked much more haggard. She said tremulously, "Sincere, you're back." She reached for my hand. I quickly stepped back, avoiding her touch. She then noticed Wendy beside me. She asked, "Who is she?" Fire burned in her eyes. I politely replied, "This is my wife and son." Her eyes widened. "You're married? And you have a child?" Charles tilted his head, confused. "Daddy, who are they?" Lily retorted, "He's my daddy, not yours." Like an angry little lion, she charged at me. I stepped in front of Sincere and pushed her back. She froze, tears welling up. She cried, "Daddy, you don't want me anymore." She sobbed, "Daddy, I was wrong. I shouldn't have believed that bad man. Please come back. I only want you as my daddy. I will never believe anyone else again." Victoria's eyes reddened. "Why didn't you show us the recording sooner? If I had seen it earlier, I wouldn't have married that bastard Benjamin." At that moment, a Cullinan pulled up. The driver got out and hurried to us. He said, "Madam, I'm sorry, I'm late." I signaled for Wendy to get in the car with Charles. She glanced at me and whispered in my ear, "Come back soon, or I'll be jealous." I glared at her and said, "My taste isn't bad enough to go back to an old flame." After they got in the car, I chuckled to Victoria, "It was intentional, locking you and Benjamin together. How else could I make up for the suffering I endured?" Victoria's face went pale. "I'm sorry, I knew you wouldn't forgive me and Lily, but I was still holding on to a glimmer of hope." Lily was covered in tears. She cried, "Daddy, I really know I was wrong. Please give me one more chance, just one last time." I bent down, looked at her and sighed. That last chance was used up 5 years ago. Let's just say that our fate as father and daughter is shallow. Lily, I can only say, look ahead. Stop dwelling on what can't be changed. She was about to say more, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned around and got into the car. A month after I left, Victoria married Benjamin. At the same time, my father officially appointed Benjamin as vice president of the company. I had been keeping an eye on their situation. Once Benjamin had a stable footing at the company, and Victoria was pregnant, I sent a recording to the cell phones of my family members and Victoria. It was of a conversation between Benjamin and me in the old mansion's garden. After sending it, I didn't pay them any more attention until today. After getting in the car, my domestic branch's staff, who were in the car with Wendy and me, greeted me and then updated me on the situation of my family and Victoria and Lily over the past few years. In short, they were not doing well. Victoria broke down after learning the truth from the recording. No matter how Benjamin begged, she insisted on divorcing him, even though she was pregnant, and she had an abortion. During an argument, Benjamin himself lost his footing, fell down the stairs, and broke his leg. Because Victoria resented what he had done, she refused to call for help. By the time he arrived at the hospital, it was too late to save his leg, and now he has a permanent limp. He tried to get my family to help him, but having also heard the recording, they now treated him like an enemy. My mother avoided him. My father coldly mocked him. A disabled man is not worthy to inherit the sincere family's business. Megan even kicked him out of the house. With nowhere to go, he stubbornly refused to divorce. But Victoria grew increasingly cold towards him, even moving to another house with Lily. Benjamin resented their heartless betrayal and sold the Sincere and Victoria family's secrets he had secretly gathered over the years to other companies. Both companies successively failed on key projects. Their cash flow dried up, and they were on the brink of bankruptcy. Inevitably, both companies had to sell off assets and downsize, now barely hanging on. Benjamin, on the other hand, was sent to a sanatorium by the furious Sincere and Victoria families working together. Megan had mercy and didn't send him to an insane asylum. The sanatorium was picturesque and had excellent conditions, but Benjamin could never leave. Staying in such a place, he would probably have to be transferred to an insane asylum in a few years. Hearing this, I chuckled and said, "I have to thank Benjamin. If it weren't for him, our company wouldn't have gained this advantage." Wendy and I returned to the country to handle the acquisition of the Sincere and Victoria families' assets. Wendy laughed and threw herself into my arms, saying, "Isn't it all thanks to you? Didn't you design the scheme to sell their company's secrets?" Then she remembered something and said nervously, "I saw your daughter begging with tears streaming down her face today. You didn't soften, did you? You absolutely can't soften." I rubbed my forehead, exasperated. "Will you ever stop?" I glanced at my sleeping son and my eyes softened. "Charles is my only child." She snorted. "That's more like it." I said, "Honey, if you're so worried, why don't we have another one? Have a few more." "Ah, honey, I was wrong." Before I could finish, Wendy angrily pinched my arm. During my time in the country, my father, mother, and Megan had come to see me. I avoided them every time, but finally, I had no choice but to make things clear. After not seeing them for several years, my parents had aged a lot, and even Megan had some gray hair. It seemed they had worried a lot about the company these past few years. My mother held my hand, tears in her eyes, and my father sighed deeply. Megan hesitated, but in the end, she didn't say anything. They apologized to me, begged for my forgiveness, and said they had been blinded by greed. They had never expected Benjamin to be so malicious. They said they hoped I would return, and that the family inheritance would still be mine. I politely refused and said, "I'm here to see you today just to say that my relationship with you ended 5 years ago. I hope you won't come looking for me again, or I can't guarantee how much the Sincere family's assets will be worth when they sell." After saying that, I left without looking at their reactions. Behind me, I heard their regretful sighs. It felt like a lifetime ago. After that, they really didn't come looking for me anymore. As for Lily, I didn't know what Victoria had told her, but they didn't appear before me again. It wasn't until the day Wendy and I finished the acquisition and were heading back to the US with our son that our bodyguard told us at the airport that there were 4 adults and a child secretly watching us. Wendy hired the bodyguard out of concern that those people might harass me again. Charles was a little nervous and asked me, "Are those the people who said they were Daddy's family?" I smiled and pinched his cheek. "They are irrelevant people." After entering the gate, my phone received several messages from unknown numbers. I just scanned them. They were all things like, "Forgive," "Sorry," "Waiting for you forever." I didn't click to read the details, I just deleted them all. Those who abandoned me, their past is gone. But thankfully I looked at Wendy and Charles. God had let me find people who truly loved me.